is Spooky Stories time. Yay! Jack and Jill are back again for another year of Spooky Stories. Good morning. Welcome. This is our Halloween Spooky Story service. It's that time of year. As you know, Skeletons, Jack, and Jill are back again for another year. This is our third year of Spooky Stories. Oh, what's that, Jill? Oh, don't worry. They're not too spooky. These are for all ages, so don't worry. Jack? Okay, well, true, you're skeletons, so you're already spooky. I understand that. But don't worry. These are some of their favorite stories that they love to share with everybody every year. So let's start with one of Jack's favorite stories. You know, Jack is the Jack of the Lantern. We told his story the first year of how he became the Jack of the Lantern and how he roams the world in the Jack-o'-lanterns, and that's how we have our spooky Jack-o'-lanterns every year. So he loves stories about pumpkins. So let's share one of your favorite stories about your friend Carlson. Carlson, the Living Pumpkin. This is A Night with a Living Pumpkin by Glenn Francis Faelnar. Matthew and Jessica came rushing down the hallway and stopped just shy of the front door. They were filled with energy and excitement while they watched their parents walk towards them. Halloween had finally arrived, and trick-or-treating was all that was on their mind. Once their front door was open, they ran outside and they disappeared. Now, Jessica wanted to be Red Riding Hood that year, so she dressed up as that character, complete with a red hood and a basket. She also carried around her Scooby-Doo stuffed toy as a stand-in for the big bad wolf. Meanwhile, Matthew dressed up as the fastest man alive, the Flash. It had been one of his favorites since he saw the Justice League cartoon on television. Now, the roads in the neighborhood were filled with children in colorful costumes, bringing baskets and plastic bags. There were older children as well, and most of them were chaperones for their little brothers and sisters. Jessica and Matthew even bumped into a few of their friends. They showed off their costumes and gave much-deserved compliments to one another. Now, as the evening progressed, Jessica and Matthew visited more and more houses until they reached the most deserted parts of the neighborhood. None of them had been able to walk that far from their house the night before. While they were strolling, Jessica saw something that made her stop abruptly. The sweet delicacies rustled inside when the basket shook at the sudden halt in motion. She grabbed Matthew by the arm to get his attention, and when she had his attention, she pointed to a house that seemed empty and said, "Was there always a house here?" Now, Matthew saw the house and began to question whether or not he had seen the house before. They passed by that street on the way to school, so surely he would have noticed. But that night, he wasn't sure if he was. The house in front of them looked old and time-weary, and instead of clean-cut grass, weeds had sprouted in its place. The lack of light made it seem like the house was empty. Both of them felt curious but equally scared. They both shared a look, which telegraphed that they thought the same thing without saying a word. They gave each other a nod and approached the house together. The wooden floors creaked as they stepped onto the front porch. The door was full of cobwebs, and Matthew had to pull away some for the doorknob. He turned the knob and found that it was unlocked. The door creaked as it slowly opened. Before they could enter the house, something appeared in front of them and said, "Hello!" They immediately ran away from the house, screaming. They both stopped when they were far enough from the house to catch their breath. Jessica felt her heartbeat so fast, she thought it would leap out of her chest. Matthew looked at his little sister and asked her, "Are you okay?" She nodded and told them they needed to go home. He noticed something was missing and asked Jessica, "Where's Scooby?" Uh-oh. Jessica gasped in horror when she realized she had dropped Scooby back at the creepy old house. Both of them knew they were going to have to go back there and get it. So they tiptoed their way across the front lawn, making sure they weren't making any noises to alert whoever was inside the house. They looked around the front porch for the toy, but they were unable to find it. Then someone behind them said, "Are you looking for this?" They turned around and were left speechless when they saw him. He was a small boy. He wore a plaid shirt and pants with suspenders. He appeared normal, except he had a pumpkin for a head. Matthew grabbed the chair of the front porch and was ready to use it as a weapon, while Jessica hid behind her older brother. Give us Scooby back, or I'll hit you with this chair. I'm not kidding, he said shakily. Despite his clear conviction in his threat, it did nothing to hide his fear. No, I mean you no harm. Here, I'll give you your toy back, the boy said. He had his arm stretched out in front just to assure him that he truly meant no harm. He walked closer to them and left the toy on the steps of the porch. The pumpkin-headed boy backed away slowly. Matthew took the chance and picked up Scooby from the steps. He handed it to Jessica, who she hugged tightly, and then lifted the chair again for protection. Now that Scooby was back, Matthew and Jessica, they were ready to leave. They slowly moved forward with Matthew still holding that chair. He stopped just as he was about to reach the sidewalk. He wanted to get out of there as soon as possible, but curiosity had a hold of him, and he couldn't help but ask. "What's wrong with your head?" he asked. The pumpkin-headed boy looked at him puzzled, as if he'd failed to understand the question. There was a moment of silence before Matthew said, "Well, why is your head a pumpkin?" "Oh, yes. I guess my head is a bit strange to some. Why don't you come inside and I'll tell you all about it? We can have some cookies and some chocolate milk," the boy said. He casually walked to the door, looked back, and said, "Oh, my name is Carlson, by the way." Matthew wanted to ignore the invitation, but Jessica also had the same curiosity. She was already making her way to the door. Matthew tried to call her back, but it was too late. He sighed and followed her inside. The house, despite how it looked outside, was surprisingly clean on the inside. The lights illuminated the cozy living room, so they sat on the couch, which was soft and comfortable. It had a fireplace, which kept the room warm. Carlson disappeared into the kitchen and then reappeared with a tray with a plate of cookies and 2 glasses of chocolate milk. He placed the tray on the table in front of Jessica and Matthew and told them to eat as much as they wanted. And while Jessica and Matthew ate, Carlson began the interesting story of how he became to be. Carlson had been brought to life by the wishes of a boy named Jack. Was that you, Jack? Jack and his family lived in the house they were currently in a long time ago. Jack had no friends and was lonely. So Halloween night, he wanted to go trick-or-treating, but he had no one to go with. So he took a pumpkin, which was supposed to be made into a jack-o'-lantern, and made a wish to the stars above. The stars heard his plea and brought Carlson to life, a boy with a pumpkin head, who he named Carlson. Now both of them had fun trick-or-treating that night. Carlson had so much fun with Jack that he made Halloween his favorite day. However, the next morning when he woke up, Jack and his parents, they were gone, and the house was completely empty. Now Carlson has been waiting for Jack to come back ever since. Matthew and Jessica felt sorry for Carlson. Matthew especially felt bad for threatening to hit Carlson with a chair. He wasn't a scary threat. He was just sad and lonely. See, not too scary. Carlson turned on the radio and started dancing, and he urged Jessica and Matthew to join in. They were hesitant at first, but seeing Carlson dance made it seem so much fun. So they got up and they joined in, and they all danced and danced until they couldn't dance anymore. Time went by quickly, and much to Jessica and Matthew's disappointment, it was already getting late, and they had to go home. Their parents might worry about them if they stay out too late. Carlson saw them out the door and said their goodbyes, but before they left, they shared some of their candy with Carlson, which he graciously accepted. They waved goodbye one last time before finally making their way home. Now the next morning, Jessica and Matthew came back to Carlson's house. They knocked on the door, but no one came to answer. They called out, "Carlson," but he still wasn't there. They tried turning the doorknob and found that it was open. So they entered the house and found a lone pumpkin on the table. It was on top of a note. When they picked it up, it said, "Until next Halloween." Jessica and Matthew left the house feeling sad that they didn't get to see Carlson again, but they kept the note and treated it as a promise. They came home that day and looked forward to next Halloween when they could spend another night with Carlson, the living pumpkin. Now see, yay. See, that wasn't too spooky, now was it? Now I know you love candy, so I will tell you a little story about trick-or-treating, but it's with a ghost. Don't worry, it's not too spooky. I think you might like this one. This is Me and My Ghost by Templeton Moss. On Halloween, I took a sheet and cut 2 holes for eyes, because that night I trick-or-treat and earn my candy prize. I put it on and made my way from door to door to door. I won a lot of treats that day, and every house brought more. But then I turned a corner there, and what then did I see? Before me, floating in the air, a little ghost, like me. A tiny ghost, so very small. I asked this little one, "Is this a trick? Who's doing that?" But the answer there came none. I turned and tried to walk away, but looked around to see the tiny flying ghostly thing was sticking close to me. At night I went and gathered sweets. I walked here and there, but everywhere I went my ghost stayed very, very near. And even after I went home to count what I'd received, the ghost refused to go away. 'Twas not to be believed. My bigger brother, name of Tom, was clever and well-read, and when I asked him what was up, he thought a bit, then said, "It's obvious to me, at least, what's going on here, bro. The little ghost thinks you're his dad, and that's why he won't go." We tried to tell the ghost the truth, that we were not the same, but he just hovered in the air, obedient and tame. No matter what we said or did, the ghost would not disperse. And so I knew he had to stay, for better or for worse. The ghost went with me everywhere, to church, to school, at play. I found that I was liking him a little more each day. We soon became the best of friends and never were apart, until there came that tragic day that nearly broke my heart. For Ghost and I were walking home, and then we chanced to meet a stranger. 'Twas about my size and covered in a sheet. No, not a sheet. It was a ghost, a real ghost. Oh, no. I saw my friends and said, "Oh, dear, wherever did you go? You disappeared on Halloween, and I've been worried sick. But now I've found you, so come on, we better go home quick." And now the truth of what occurred was very plain to see. The little ghost thought I was Mom, and so he followed me. But now his real mom had come to take her son away. Mom wished me well, then off they went. Goodbye, I could not say. But that was many years ago. I've grown up today, and I've not seen my little ghost since Mom took him away. And each year on Halloween, in the chill October air, I feel I'm being followed, but I look, and nothing's there. See, not too scary. But I know you have a big day tonight, so why don't you rest up and take a little nap? Would you like a bedtime story? Yeah? Okay. Well, this is our bedtime story, a very popular one for many people. Goodnight, Goon. So, Goodnight, Goon. So there's the first one. In the cold gray tomb, there was a gravestone and a black lagoon and a picture of Martians taking over the moon. And there were 3 little mummies rubbing their tummies, and 2 hairy claws, and a set of jaws, and a loud screechy bat, and a black cat, and a skull and a shoe, and a pot full of goo, and a hairy old werewolf who was hollering, "Boo." Good night, tomb. Good night, Goon. Good night, Martians taking over the moon. Good night, bones in the black lagoon. Good night, mummies. Good night, tummies. Good night, claws, and good night, jaws. Good night, moans, and good night, groans. Good night, screechy bat, and good night, hat. Good night, skull, and good night, shoe. Good night, creature. Good night, goo. Good night, you. Get under there. Good night, monsters everywhere. So good night. Thank you all for joining us. You take a nice little nap and get ready for the witch's ball this evening, okay? And thank you, everyone, for enjoying our spooky stories this year. Yay. Good night, Jill.